So what do you do when you finish First John? You just go on to Second John. Now, Second John is written to a different group of people than First John, although not vastly or wildly different. I mean, it's just a little bit of a different location, and I want you to pay attention to some of the terminology that John uses to identify himself and identify the church that he is writing to. So let's just dive in. And the first thing you see in verse 1 of 2 John 1 is the elder. John identifies himself, the elder. Now, if depending on your church background, you may have a view of who or what an elder is. In the first century, the leaders of the church, and when I say church, I don't mean local church only. I mean the biggest idea of the church, wherever it was. One of the pieces of the model for the church, which by the way was a fairly loose model, right, was that there were leaders whose responsibility was to care for and shepherd the church. Now, we think of elder as a religious term, but in the first century, elder was not a religious term. It was a family term. And what it pointed to was an older sibling. And actually, in original language here is Greek, the elder is a masculine gender word. This would have been applied mainly to men, so that there were such things as elder sisters, meaning older sisters. But generally, when it's unattached, as it is here, the elder, that's a masculine thing. And this we can be reasonably sure. I mean, there's plenty of reasons for us to believe that John was referring to himself as the elder. He was the leader of the church, and tradition and history indicate that was in Ephesus. Well, I want to, me, I can make a mountain out of a molehill, but let's think about this. Today, the church, I believe the church ought to be led by elders as well. Now, we've gotten real specific in terms of roles and responsibilities, and this is not quite the same thing. Our divisions and our concepts are a little bit different than they would have been in the first century. When the church was established on the day of Pentecost, 50 days after Passover, Jesus ascended, and then the disciples waited, and the day of Pentecost happened. The Holy Spirit descended, the Holy Spirit came, and the church was established. Then it had to be organized. Now, this was no small thing, because on that very first day, 3,000 people were baptized and became a part of what at that point in time would have been a loose affiliation. I mean, they weren't established as an organization. They didn't have charter papers. They didn't have bylaws. They didn't have constitutions. They didn't need it back then. Now, it quickly, as it grew in size, the scope of leading, caring for, I hate to use our modern idea of managing and leading is so corporate and yet some of those ideas applied over into this first century church. But the first century church was organized like a family, not a business. Now, and here we don't have the same. When we think about family, we're not really thinking in the same terms as people in the first century. And I'm going to just give you a few ideas on that. One is, today a family is a mother and a father and two children. There were families in the first century of only two children, but these were the very, very rare exception. There was plenty of reason for having large families, and there were two reasons, outstanding reasons in the first century for having a large family. One was every kid you had was free labor until they were apprenticed out as teenagers. Free labor is good in an agricultural society, which that's what century one was. Second thing was, a large amount of children indicated prestige. The larger your family was, the more prestigious your family became in that society, in that culture. It's opposite today. I occasionally, and only occasionally, I encounter people with 4 kids or more. And you know what our culture says to those families is, dude, haven't you heard about like the pill? You know how those babies happen, right? There was in the 70s, late 60s and 70s, there was a full court press to reduce the size of families. When I was in high school, I graduated in 1971. And in my high school, the very cool, hip teachers were advocating 2 kids. That's all you need. And by the way, let's stop the growth of the population. We need ZPG, zero population growth. The earth can't support us if we keep this up. There's a lot of reasons that I could debate on that, and I'm not an authority, but I have strong opinions. This is what happened, though. Now, 50 years later, the size of families has shrunken so that how many offers have you ever seen for a vacation package that said, for a family of 4? Well, I've got 3 kids. We're a family of 5. They've got 4 kids. They're a family of 6. That you're not normal. I went down a bunny trail. Let me just tell you, mathematically, if Christians maintain this 2 kids per family thing, we're in deep, deep doo-doo over time, because, well, let's just talk about the Islamic world. Islamic families are not small. Their desire is to have large families. And oh, by the way, the theology of Islam, it semi-commands large families, and here's why. You take over the world, the more kids you have, the more quickly you can take over the world. I don't want to get just totally down on the base of this, what's the word I would use, mercenary view of the Christian life. But can we be honest and realize that if you just look at the growth of population and the size of families, the demographic picture of the world, China, India, and the Islamic world are outpopulating America in astounding numbers. All right, so, okay, get off that soapbox. Now let's just talk about century one. Large families that were desirable. And so instead of this little family group, we had large families and we had extended families living together. It was the rare family, the rare kid in a family that would say, I'm going to go seek my fortune somewhere else. Was a rare individual that ever had gone more than 50 or 80 miles away from where they had been born. The extended family often lived together under the same roof. So our view of family was very different than the first century view of family. And the church was organized in century 1 as a family, not a business. Now, a family that is healthy, and I hate to use this term, but runs well, I don't know what else to say, does so because they have observed certain principles of organization, not business necessarily. And a business that is run well and that is thriving and healthy is partly the reason for that is because they are organized well. So there are those two common things, but a family is not a business. A business might be designed to relate to itself like a family. And I think if we have a healthy model for family that we're working from, that can be very healthy for a business, but that's a whole other subject. I do think that if the church does not return to its foundational roots of organization so that it functions and relates to itself as a family, we will be less than healthy always. And a less than healthy church will have less influence than it could or should in the world. John, identifying himself as the elder, was not a hierarchical organizational term. It was a family term that did indicate a position, a role of leader, even protector. And think about this. In the physical absence of the biological father and mother, the responsibility for the care of the family fell to the oldest male in the family, the elder. And their job was to do everything within their power to help the family be healthy and whole. Their interest was in what was good for the family. Now, if that elder was a mature and healthy individual, they will often have made choices that would not have been great for them because personally, individually, but what would have been great for the family. In other words, there are times when the choices would cost them the most, and yet the outcomes would be best for the family. When you think about the way a church is organized, isn't that what the elders ought to be doing? Shouldn't the elders be the wise, mature, experienced brothers? And I'm not even going to get into can women be elders. I'm just going to say siblings in the family. The physical absence of the parents, okay, God is always spiritually present and in some mystical ways physically as well, but not in flesh and blood form. So the elders then they become older siblings, and their role is to care for, to look out for the best interests of the family. And sometimes they have to do things that are not great for them as individuals in order to do great things or good things for the benefit and health of the family. Okay. I've got this big, long theological diatribe about how the church is God's family. And every time I come across the family terminology, I have to stop and say something about it. That's what today was about. Next time, we'll move on and we'll just go inch by inch, because inch by inch, anything's a cinch, to get into John's second letter. But for now, I'm done, and I'll look forward to connecting next time on Soul Care with Stevie Boy.